everyone. Welcome to the 9th episode of Concussion Chats. My name is Taya. Concussion Chats is a podcast hosted by the McGill Students for Concussion Legacy Foundation with the help of Nick from Concussion Talk Podcast. We're dedicated to providing hope and strength to those suffering from concussions through sharing experiences. Today, I have a recording of David. David first became injured in August of 2006 following 2 mTBIs within 10 months. He also suffers from fibromyalgia and PTSD, among other injuries and damages. Learning to free himself from an unhelpful medical system was the best move he ever made, and it has kept him alive to this day. He works as an energy and Reiki instructor and has found many listed ways to heal the mind, brain, and spirit. He is now in his second year of podcasting and videocasting for post-concussion syndrome awareness worldwide, fibromyalgia awareness, and spiritual and metaphysical podcasts called The Inward Matrix. And he lives in the north of England.
Thank you so much, Taya, and thank you initially to Emily for inviting me along. And apologies I couldn't make it earlier, but I was moving house and had no internet and so on. So yeah, thank you, Taya. Right, okay, so I don't really know any of you, but if we just go back to that brief bio, if we go back to August 2006, I was working in a fairly normal job, and I had an accident one day. I used to live at the top of quite a large hill, and it was wet, and it was mossy, and it was dark, and I was just going down the hill like I'd done 1,000 times before. And all of a sudden my feet went from underneath me, and I just, being 6'3" as well, I kind of went down and bashed my head on the pavement, and was just kind of, a bit of bleeding, not dazed. I think I might have been out for a short while, and I was just so disorientated that I got up and I slipped and fell again. So it was like within the space of minutes, I was like, oh, and first I'd hit the occipital region of my head, the back, and then I think it hit the side of my head. So I just kind of like crawled home and got my torn clothes, got a bath and went to bed. At the time I was living alone, and I was kind of like, well, I felt all right the next day, a bit spaced out. I thought, well, if I go to hospital here in England, they're not going to do anything for you anyway. They'll probably give you some painkillers, check you over, send you home. And it actually took me 8 years, nearly 9 years of trying with the National Health Service here. We have a public health system here, which you pay for in advance. But at the point of use, its intention is that it's free to use. So I tried for nearly 9 years to see a neurologist or a neuropsychologist, and was just refused again and again. I was injured again in 2007. And at that point, after that, I lost my job and my house before the last housing crash happened. So I ended in a downward spiral. I ended up being homeless 3 times in total in the years that followed. And at the point where I thought things couldn't get any worse, losing everything and, losing a lot of friends, people as well. I got to the point where I was taking a lot of prescription medications, and it was making things worse and worse. I think at one point I was on about 10 different medications, including the hydrocodone, benzodiazepines, sleeping tablets, antidepressants, you name it. It was quite a zombifying cocktail. And being in the throes of that, I did have further concussions. I think I'd had in total, up until last year, I think I'd had something like 9 concussions. I got to a point where, after being homeless and having had further concussions, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and I was just totally exhausted, worn out all of the time, and I had to find housing in that supported housing system here, which is where you kind of taken in off the streets, and you're kind of guided back into leading a more independent type of life. It was about 2009, I eventually got somewhere to live. And what I noticed was people around me in the same type of housing, they had various health problems and things as well, nearly all chronic health issues. And I would regularly lose friends. People would pass away through either illegal drugs or prescription drugs that were wrongly prescribed, all kinds of reasons. So it really, at that point, that was what instigated me to start the Facebook groups and the social media groups. I was sat on my own in my home and thinking, well, somebody's got to do something about this here. This can't go on. The government's not listening. The health services aren't listening. The people, the welfare, what we call DWP here, they're not listening to anybody with this. It was just like a totally hidden epidemic with people. And so I set out to start the groups on Facebook. I've been on Facebook since 2005. So I started a group up and just started by inviting family and friends and people and called it post-concussion syndrome, awareness. And people started to join, and I thought, well, this is okay. I can kind of get, to at least to try to show some of my family and friends and acquaintances, what I'm going through, and maybe it'll spread a little bit. And I just kept at it every day, just trying to nurture it. And then I found other wonderful people around the world that were willing to help. There's a wonderful lady who's now a dear friend, although we've never physically met, but she's in New Zealand, Gina Hubert, and she kind of co-runs a lot of the groups. We have about 7 different groups, and that's just a way of reaching out to people. But there are other admins in Scotland and in a few in the USA and Europe and different places. And they've all kind of, we've all gotten to know each other. And we went through some really, first few years were really trying, because having the opinion that people can heal and should heal was very, very unpopular. Particularly with people that just simply wanted to stick to a certain type of allopathic medication treatment, allopathic drugs and things. And we would see over the months and years that those people seldom seemed to make any progress. In fact, many of them would be going backwards into worsening depression, anxiety. They would gain weight. They'd have all kinds of issues. And I knew what I'd been through. And up until 2012, I was still, quite heavily medicated and still doing that. So that group and that cause has grown into the Post-Concussion Syndrome Awareness podcast, and then the other one's the fibromyalgia in Wood Matrix. Because about a year or so ago, I would have never, ever dreamt of doing podcasting or video casting. Like I said, I didn't like the sound of my voice, and I was too shy anyway. I was kind of like, I don't want to put my face out there. But doing what I do, I kind of it was like some kind of inner calling or outer calling, saying, sometimes I get this saying, you've got compelling me to do something. So I set about doing it all on my own. And if you listen to the first 2 or 3 or 4 episodes, I'm kind of a little bit nervous and a little bit tentative and, stuttering a little bit at points. But after that, I found that, well, this is what I was meant to be doing. And I'm sure if any of you do follow podcasts that I do, I am quite a bit of a non-conformist, but often controversial. I found that it is, I can't help. My ancestry is half English, half Austrian. And where I come from in the north of England, Yorkshire is very plain speaking people. If we don't like something, we'll say, and the Austrian side is even worse. So, sometimes I'll say something, mouth will engage before brain engages. So I'm actively trying to get better at that daily. So that's generally most of my journey. I've had most of the challenges have been with the medical profession here, not just in the fact that they didn't know what to do with me and tried to misdiagnose me as having all kinds of different things. And they occasionally told me a few lies, and then bribed me when they found out I'd been lied to. So it was kind of an uneasy relationship. And what I wanted to share with you for positivity, for the sake of hope and knowing, is that even going through all of that, 9 concussions, and getting to kind of where I did in 2012, where I literally couldn't stand anymore. As the fibromyalgia kicked in, I would initially went months without sleeping. I would just rest my body, but I could not sleep. And that is quite an experience when the hallucinations and things are quite bad. So at that point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'd already got off most medications, but I was still on long-term opiate painkillers like dihydrocodone and codeine as well, which they left me on for about 7 years unchecked. Now I still have histamine intolerance and diamine oxidase deficiency as a result of long-term opiate use. And that's something I'm trying to heal now with functional natural medicine and different healing. And I'm having success with that, as I did with fibromyalgia and as I did with post-concussion syndrome. But I'm not purporting that route to anybody, because this is just how I've recovered. In 2012, I said to myself, after another friend had died, I said, this is enough. I can't do this anymore. If I carry on this way, and at that time as well, I did self-medicate with alcohol too. So it was uncomfortable. I was like, well, if you carry on this way, David, you're probably going to be following those friends to the grave as well. And that was the moment when I was like, well, okay. I don't advocate going cold turkey off of anything, but I'd been on a medium to high dose of benzodiazepines, diazepam, which nobody told me, not one single doctor told me that it's harder to get off of diazepam and benzodiazepines than it is to get off heroin. So they didn't tell me this before I started. You just like, come, take the sweeties, off you go, bye-bye. Come back every couple of weeks for more. So yeah, I did go cold turkey, which was, that's just my way of doing it. Like I say, I don't advocate that. And that took about 10 weeks of hiding indoors, sweating, shaking, kind of all kinds of unpleasant stuff. But I did make it through the other side. And following that, like I said, like Taya introduced me, and she said that I teach Reiki healing. I've done that for about 20 years. That's a natural system of healing, which came back to us from Japan. But it's a self-healing system whereby you transmit photonic light energy particles, or chi, as they call it in the East, or prana in India. You use this to help to heal yourself through your emotions, your psyche, and also for your body as well. That, for me, that saved me greatly. And at that same time, I had to start looking for alternatives, because I still would suffer with some depression and anxiety and a lot of pain. And my body was had been through a few years of hell. So I found a Bowen technique therapist by accident. I attended a meeting similar to this, quite near to here, for fibromyalgia awareness. And this lady, Dr. Merrick, was giving a talk. And at the end of the talk, she said, I'm looking for kind of people with fibromyalgia to work on, because I've not worked with them before. So she needed guinea pigs, in essence. So my hand went straight up. And bless her, she's still a dear friend to this day. I love her to bits. She's so kind to me. And she said, well, I'll treat you at like half the normal cost. Because obviously I was on, welfare, less than £100 a week, which is, I don't know what that is, probably about 180 Canadian dollars or less. I don't know, something like that. And so she gave me my life back in the space of several months of treatment. And every treatment was heavy, and I would be knocked out and just unable to do anything for 2 or 3 days afterwards. It's a very simple procedure, Bowen, but it is very powerful, or it was for me. And from being literally, I was before that, I was a drugged and drunk cabbage for a while. I've just had no hope left in life. Didn't have pretty much anything left to my name. after having, you know, kind of a good career, a good house, good job, and, you know, holidays and all that stuff. I was kind of down at the bottom. And yeah, after having had that course, I also looked more into different types of healing, and I still to this day only use natural medicines, which I've tested and trial and error over many years. And yeah, following that 2012, I found that within a few months, I was able to go running again, go back to the gym, work out. I was able to read again. I'm a massive bibliophile. I have my partner here. I've got like 3 or 4 bookcases, probably about 500-600 books on every crazy subject you can imagine, known to woman and mankind. And I found that for this first few years, I could pick up a book, I could look at it and squint at it for a while, and then after about 5 minutes, I'd have to put it down because it just wouldn't go in. My brain couldn't process it. And that was kind of a bit soul destroying. So yeah, after that, I could read books again. I could do a lot more things. And then I got a few lucky breaks. I managed to move to a better area in 2013. And then following that, the year later, my son was born. Arlo, he's just gone 6. And that was, I'd never been a father before. And I was then age 40 by then. And I was like, nah, you've missed your chance. And yeah, he's been a massive blessing in my life. And it was just like something that I never ever thought would be possible. So he's my inspiration a lot of the time, most of the time, all of the time. And yeah, now I worked the last year or two to, I'd learned how to heal concussions in myself within a week or two. And I had one, I think, last March or so, and I had 2 in one weekend on the ceiling beam. That's smack the top of my head. And I literally, you know, when they say you see stars, I saw stars. And I did that twice in one weekend. And then I thought, well, I know what to do now. I've got my own protocol. And I was well again within a week or so, with no signs of concussion. So it's one of those things that I'd kind of set out to prove to myself what I wanted to prove to myself, that you know, there are many different ways to do this. And I think if you only take one thing from my talk today, that would be that using a variance of means safely and holistically, it can only be a good thing. I do have a favourite saying, which is not necessarily just aimed at allopathic medicine. You know, they only have a couple of tools really. And it's an old Japanese saying. It says that when the only tool you possess is a hammer, everything suddenly begins to look like a nail. And to me, that often sums up the allopathic approach, because as with medications, the only other 2 tools really that are used are radiation for cancers and things, and surgery. And you can't have your brain operated on. You don't need chemotherapy. So that leaves a singular option. Now, I would never say that allopathic medications are wrong to use, but like the leading experts have always said, with post-concussion syndrome, they are potentially harmful and dangerous if used beyond the very short term. And of course, a lot of us have other issues, chronic illness issues and things as well. So they may always be just something that we have to use. I feel myself so lucky that I've been able to get away from that and to find alternatives. But that was my path. And I'm sure each and every one of you, if I sat and talked to you individually and listened to your stories, you would see parallels, and you would see similar things that we'd all been through. And to give you hope, I'm kind of, in a way, people say I'm kind of living proof of that. You can heal and recover to a massive extent. Yes, there will always be a few little things that I'm dealing with, a bit of aphasia, a bit of ataxia, but I've learned not to take that personally like I used to do. So sometimes if I'm walking down the street and I see a sign on a bus or a shop, my brain reads it completely differently. You know, and it's actually what the brain comes out with. I have to check like two or three times what the brain actually comes out with now. It's funny stuff, and I'm like, you know, yeah. For instance, there was a shop over the road where I used to live, and it was a hardware shop, Yorkshire Paints. They sold paints and stuff. And the first time I walked past, my brain just said, Yorkie pants. It's like, Yorkie pants? So I looked back again and it was like, no, it's Yorkshire Paints. So I've learned that, yeah, you have to roll with it and go with that, and you know, be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself. Self-care is the biggest and the most important thing that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and doing so to nurture yourself is the key importance. So whether it's like I do, I wake up, I'll do some meditation, I'll have some quiet time, or and then I'll use, if I need something, I've got a Rife machine here, which is a healing device. I'll use that if I've got any ailments and things. I use mantras. I'll go and walk in nature. I'll just do anything regularly and exercise that attunes me. Definitely attunes me back to how I should be. It's like a baseline for me now. You know, diet. I use and have used for many years regular fasting, just water fasting. That'd be, I know people get horrified when I talk about this, but that would be water only for 7, 14 or 21 days, no food. So it's like, you can't do that, but you can, and it is a spiritual practice, and it is exceptionally helpful in many ways, both physically, spiritually, and so on. But of course, you do need the right information and guidance for that. But like I say, I've been doing that for about 20 years anyway. So I just find now it's really good to do fast every so often. And now, as this time has come on all of us, and we're all kind of left sat at home or kind of in, you know, a bit of, well, a lot of uncertainty, the malady of the year, and what's to come. It is a point where we could kind of look ahead. Sorry, I just nearly lost my train of thought with the screen flashing then, but I know it's 5 minutes. Yeah, we could look ahead and we can think about, you know, in this time where we've got the time to do this. And yeah, going back to, I've been doing quite a few podcasts for all 3 different channels that I have. And a lot of that is just going out to people right now. In the first shutdown, we had people weren't so keen to podcast and do things, but now it seems that people have, you know, integrated a lot of issues and are quite more open and willing to talk. So, for instance, you know, last night I had a wonderful 2 3/4 hour chat with Dr. Ralph Cornwell from Boston. He doesn't like to say who he works for. We're just allowed to say Ivy League. A picture of figure of a key, and you probably get it. And there was Chris Ledgerwood from Seattle, and Rob Stolker from New Jersey, and they're both actively involved in helping lacrosse, football, hockey players, not just with the helmet issue, but also with athlete training and neck strengthening into the prevention of post-concussion syndrome. You know, you can actually prevent it by strength training your neck. So yeah, this is a type of thing that I hope by having these conversations and discussions, and the great thing with a podcast or videocast is you can stop it and go back to it later. By having these hard conversations and being as open and necessarily controversial, not just controversial for the sake of being controversial, then we can not only connect people. So there's 3 people, 2 whom previously knew each other but never met, and another one on opposite sides of North America who are now connected together. And all 3 of them are in similar areas. For most of it, I was just sat there, just like, watch and learn, David. And they're now connected permanently through doing that. So I'm going to keep this up. and I'm always happy to share and converse and kind of join with you. Emily's been really kind to me to allow me to do this and to talk to you as well, and I've really enjoyed it today. So thank you all, for turning up and for listening as well. And I think that's about it, really.
Today, I have Emily, who's also part of McGill Students for Concussion Legacy Foundation, and Nick from Concussion Talk podcast joining me. Thanks for the awesome talk, David. What do you guys think about it?
Emily, go ahead, because I just...
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. I do think one of the things that I've enjoyed about being a part of this is learning about all these different ways that people have recovered and different paths and journeys that people have taken and are, continuously on. Like last week we heard a lot about Kathy talking about trying to figure out how to navigate the medical system and figuring out that she had to go to very specific types of doctors, as well as she touched on these like less advertised sides of medicine, including like the functional neurologist who doesn't have has a degree in chiropractic, not necessarily it's medical. It is medical, but you know what I mean. It's not like
it's not MD. Yeah.
It's not MD, yes. Yeah. But they're still very highly trained. And then this week, David was talking a lot about Reiki and other forms, alternative medicine outside of Western medicine. Allopathic medicine is Western medicine. So, yeah, I think it's really, really incredible, all these different ways that people can get better.
Yeah, no, I agree with Emily totally. That's just doing this and doing my podcast and other podcasts. Just it's interesting to find out, hear all these other people's experience with my experience with allopathic medicine, as he calls it. I wish I had to look it up. Honestly, I had to look up what allopathic meant. But anyway, that was my experience, and it seemed to work well for me. But I mean, every other person not every other person, but a lot of people have said that that the non-Western medicines are and the natural osteopathic or like Reiki or whatever else, different things which actually Emily and I were briefly discussing, and think Taya, you were getting a bit upset with us for not waiting till the podcast.
I was saying save
for the podcast, but that we had to kind of be a bit more open to different, not just necessarily science-based medicines that says on Google.
Yeah.
So.
Something else that David had mentioned was that like allopathic medicine and PCS are potentially harmful and dangerous if it's used like beyond the short term. And I mean, even just talking
that makes sense totally. That's why I heard a lot of this like people saying that they've had problems with like drug and alcohol and prescription drug abuse and stuff. So
yeah, and he shared about like his experience with medications that he'd been put on and like how he struggled with that. And I think that's something that maybe needs to be, well, not maybe, but like definitely needs to be talked
examined.
About more. And maybe doctors be more cautious about prescribing. Go for it, Em.
Yeah, so I think in a big thing that I think a big undertone of his talk, going off what you're saying, Taya, is this like concept of like holistic medicine. That they were focused on. What did he say? Why he was on a benzodiazepine?
Fibromyalgia, probably. Probably fibromyalgia.
I can't. No, I don't.
I missed a lot of it. So
there was, but he was just on a bunch of
different
things, and
it took a long time to see a neurologist.
Yeah, something that Yeah, and even then, if you see a neurologist, you hope it's somebody who knows about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw multiple neurologists before I got help. And I've seen it was the same thing with the narcolepsy. Like, I saw multiple people before I really got the help and listened to. But what I was trying to tie this back into is I am in this medical anthropology class, and
Yes.
my TA was so kind to send me some papers about traumatic brain injury, post-concussion syndrome, and how it's handled in Western medicine, or allopathic medicine, or biomedicine, whatever you want to call it. And I haven't gotten to read them yet, so I'll have to get back to you guys on it. But we were reading these other papers, and so I emailed my TA about it because I was like, wow, this just really describes how when we're dealing with PCS, you're going to like all these individualized doctors, but not really getting this holistic view, like what Kathy was talking about last week, and how TBI and post-concussion syndrome don't necessarily like fit very well into this model of Western medicine that we have. And I will have to get back to you guys more about that.
Send me those. I want them too.
Yeah, no, those two, those two things, that kind of makes sense, because, I mean, like you said, like, the allopathic medicine seems to be more just kind of segmented as in, like, this is for your guts, and this is for your limbs, and this is for your heart, like, medication for several, but whereas, like, brain injury obviously affects everything, so there's, like, it's hard to really say, like, this is for your, because you're feeling nauseous, so I'll give you some for your stomach, but you're feeling nauseous because you're hitting the head, and you're like, and you're not, and something else is not working, like your whole rhythm is out of whack, so it's really hard to pinpoint one exact region that you should focus on instead of just the whole body.
Yeah, and I think it's important, one, that this was David's experience, right? And he just really he's ended up off medications, right? And I do think it's important that we acknowledge that, like, some people go on medication and that really helps them. And maybe it's, like, for me, like, I'm on medication for the bipolar, which they say was triggered from the concussions, and for narcolepsy. And I went on them, years after the injury, but those have been really, really important for me to be able to continue my recovery. And I've been able to find this balance between alternative medicine and Western medicine. Like, I've very much dug into spirituality and meditation, and that's a daily practice for me. I meditated right before this, actually. It was really good. I'm getting better at it, guys.
I can't do it.
It didn't even feel like 10 minutes today. I was so shook when my timer went off. I was like, what?
Teach me different ways. I still can't. But I agree with you, Emily, with the whole, like, some people it works, some people it doesn't, and, like, finding that balance. Like, I'm the same as you, where I am on certain medications, and, like, that's totally fine too. And then some people don't take medication, like, that's totally fine too. It's all about kind of like finding what works for you. And for David, like, going off of everything and finding these alternative medicines were helpful for him.
Yeah. And he brought up some interesting points. Sorry, Nick.
No, I had nothing to say.
Yeah, like you said, like, talking about the benzodiazepines, like, those are really addicted. And, like, physiologically, you get really dependent on them. And these, doctors didn't tell him that, which I think is so, yeah, which, I mean, they put me on Seroquel several months ago. Yeah, and that, for me, some people apparently do well on it, was what some of the roughest 4 days of my life, and I went through withdrawal after 4 days. I was on a low dose for 4 days, and I had 2 days of cold sweats and nausea and sick. Like, it was withdrawal. And then I'm Googling it, and, like, people don't get off that medication well.
I'm really now too, and
And
not.
there was even someone in the group that experienced the same thing as David with the benzodiazepine and the same as you with the Seroquel. So it
Oh,
is
Seroquel. God, nice to Seroquel.
Yeah.
Okay, I got Seroquel.
It's an antipsychotic, and I'd gotten clean and sober, and they put me on Seroquel, and then it felt like I was on drugs.
Yeah, I remember
It
you
was.
texting me being like, "What? Like it feels like I'm on drugs. What was the point?"
Like I might as well just go back to my own medication, my own drugs. So I think it's tricky. And you want to be careful with Google, right?
Yes.
So
Which
like it's
apparently,
important to
apparently you
talk to
do.
your doctor, like ask them about these sorts of things. And I always,
Or have someone with you that will ask those things too.
yeah, if you're hesitant, or try and find these Facebook concussion support groups, whatever. Ask if other people have been on these, if you're feeling weird about it, because I'm sure glad I got off that stuff. That would have
Yeah.
been nasty. So I think you bring some interesting points.
Yeah, see, I know a lot of people talking about drugs they've been there, and Bill always asks me what drugs you're on, but I've never been prescribed a drug for my brain injury, except for like one time before I went back to university, we tried this drug to help my left side. Tried the Parkinson's drug, I forget what it's called, but it was just trying it. My neurologist said like it's not gonna hurt, just try it for. We'll try it for 3 months, and then I just took once a day, and like if it helps them, we can keep it on. Then it's great, but if not, then you can just quit, and there's no side effects. And it didn't work, so I just stopped. And that was some drug that everyone was on. And that was for 3 months, and yeah. Other than that, I've just been like never had any drugs to speak of. So So I mean, I can't really relate to a lot of this stuff, but
no, for sure. But like I think it's also just super important for like, because I know a lot of people don't want to be on medication, and a lot of people just always kind of think about like, oh, you're going to be on that forever and blah blah blah. Or people feel ashamed that they're on medication, but they shouldn't, because if that is what helps them function and that's what works for them, then that's totally fine. Like I don't know, I used to be embarrassed and like not want to tell people that. I mean, I still don't like just openly be like, hey everyone, guess
you just said it on a podcast, so it's
not like a game.
Cat's out of the bag now.
That's fine, whatever. But I mean, like, if I meet someone on the street, I'm not like, guess what? My name's Taya. Like, this is what I'm on. Like, no, but like, I'm not embarrassed. Like,
that would be awkward though.
And it's what helps me. And so if that's what helps someone, then like, people shouldn't be ashamed of that. And other people also shouldn't push their whole, oh, it's bad for you down their throats. People have different things that work for them, and everyone needs to be cool with that.
Yeah, and I think David did a good job saying like stating his opinions. He felt that he wasn't helped in the Western or allopathic medicine, and he had, and he said the Japanese quote. He was reading books, and he said that Japanese quote: "If the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything starts to look like a nail."
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up.
Good. I love these quotes we're getting.
That was good.
And yeah, Taya, I think I was like that for so long with medication.
Yeah.
Like when they had me on certain medication for the ADHD years ago, I just wouldn't take it, or I would use it wrong. Like I was abusing it without really realizing it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't, it didn't cross my mind for years that maybe I didn't like it so much because it wasn't right for me.
Yeah.
And then finally, I tried the Vyvanse, and Taya knows that was a game changer.
Oh my gosh, she became the most narcissistic person ever, because she was awake for the first time since I'd known her, and it was just this whole new person. It was mind blowing. But that's like, You just need to
Were
try
you guys
things out.
roommates?
No, we're in the same year of university, and we were in a lot of the same classes, so we got close in our second year. We met in first year, didn't really talk much, and then second year we got close.
Okay.
Yeah. So Taya told me when I was really narcoleptic, falling all the time.
I used to
There was-
send her home, walk her home.
Yeah. And then I started on this medication, and it's part of the reason I got clean and sober, because, you know, I had something that worked for me. And I think, you know, it's important to keep pushing through until you find something that works for you, just like David did. And the
Yeah.
other thing I wanted to bring up real quick is, and he said this, that he didn't advocate for going cold turkey.
Yes.
That is so important to tell your doctors. And I did the same thing with the Seroquel. I emailed my doctor and told him, you know, I don't think I can be on this. And he told me I could just stop taking it. He didn't tell me I was going to go through withdrawals, because I'm sure he just didn't realize that. But it is, you never, depending on what you're taking, you have to be so careful going off of it. It's really important to talk to your doctor before.
Yeah, and talk to your doctor. Don't just Google and stop taking benzodiazepine. But what should I do? And then somebody will be like, oh, just quit, or oh, just drink 10 glasses of water every hour, or something like that.
Yeah, you can.
That goes with anything you're taking, though. It doesn't even need to be benzodiazepines. I took it upon myself to stop my antidepressants in, I think it was first year, and then I started myself back on them sometime later, and like that was a horrible experience too. And so any medication that you're on, that you're prescribed, you need to talk to your doctor.
Yeah, and if you feel like your doctor isn't hearing you, doesn't want you to go, just don't stop taking it. Find a new doctor and talk to them about it. I went through a few different doctors trying to figure out the bipolar with the narcolepsy, and my body's very sensitive, so I have to start very low so this doesn't build up for anything. But yes, it's all planned with the doctor. So
yes, that's important.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with being on medication if you need it, but
yeah.
But if you're gonna stop, then just talk to somebody first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't do it alone. Don't do it on your own agenda. You should discuss it with a professional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And it sounds
so important.
But yeah, I think the Reiki thing is really, really interesting, and something that I want to read more about. Even as a science person, I do get that knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, this seems so not scientifically supported, but it helps people, and I think there's power in that.
Yeah, and the fact that it helps people, there's something about it that means it does work, even if it's just you believing in it. It's just placebo. That's still helping. So that's all that matters, really, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I concur.
All right.
I love it.
Thanks again to David for the awesome talk and his vulnerability. And thank you to Nick for helping us do this podcast. We'll have a new podcast episode Monday morning. Our upcoming podcast can be found on concussiontalk.com, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. And you can find more information about the group on concussionmtl.com. Our peer-to-peer group is free and open to everyone, and we hold 3 weekly meetings on Zoom, which will be linked in the description. Thanks for listening. HeadCheck Health bridges gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Trek Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.